So we're going to talk about what it means and nurturing those specific characteristics. So Ellen and I were just talking for a few minutes before everyone joined, and we were talking about how awareness is the first step. And so um, we need to become aware of the fact that living creatively is actually an option. And we're going to talk more about what it means to live creatively. But a lot of people confuse being creative with being artistic, right? It's very easy for us to do that. You think, oh, are you creative? And you think of painters and sculptors, right? But being creative really means, are you walking through life living in a creative way? And we're going to talk about what that means. So I'm going to bring you back to this picture I showed last time we met. And it's some carefree kindergartners. And it's interesting because when I was a first-time mom, my first child was only a couple months old, and I read this interesting article in Time magazine, and it spoke about how creativity in the U.S. was declining. And right then and there, I thought, okay, I don't want that to happen in my life. I don't want it to happen in my family's life, my children's life. So I started to think about, well, what does it really mean to be creative? What does that mean? And in this Time article, it was interesting because it showed a study that was done on kindergartners. And they went into multiple classes of kindergartners and they asked those kids, who in here is creative? And every single child raised his or her hand. Every child, right? Now, if I were to ask you ladies who's creative, do you think you would raise your hand? I see Ellen nodding. Lorraine feels she is creative. Okay, and I don't know about Ty and Carla if you want to chime in, but but do you feel like you're creative, right? Interestingly enough, this study then went into classrooms of sixth graders. Just what is that, like maybe, I don't know, 6 years later, and said, who in here is creative? And only a few raised their hands. And a couple raised their hands only because they were encouraged, like, oh, well, Ty, you're really artistic, or Ellen, you're creative. And so some people only raised their hand because they were encouraged by others. So the study was amazing in how it showed, just in the course of that time, our sense of who we are as a creative person is just dispelled. And that was really sad for me. I thought, oh my gosh, so no, this is not, this is not going to work. Right? So, what I did, and here last week or last month, we spoke about this voice of judgment and the voice of wisdom. And I wanted to put up this quote because it says, the fear of judgment is often what causes us to be conservative, to censor ourselves, and to be embarrassed about what we create. But it turns out that children don't self edit in that way. They're focused more on possibility, creativity, right? Versus judgment. And that's what we need to remember. Again, sometimes we need to envelop characteristics of children, right? We don't want to be childish, but we can sometimes look to be childlike. So I'll talk about that more in a little bit. So the good news is, ready? And I have my notes here too to make sure I cover everything. So again, we're talking about a sense of creativity in how we walk through life. So I have this simple chart here to show there's ups and downs in life, right? We all experience them. But what creative characteristics help us to keep moving forward despite those ups and downs? Okay. Does anybody want to shout out what they think a couple characteristics of a creative person are? And when I have classes in person, I'm like writing it on a chalkboard or whatever, whiteboard, and people are shouting out a couple thoughts. Anybody want to share? What do you think a creative characteristic is? Ellen.
Resourceful.
Resourceful. Okay, great. Being resourceful, having a sense of, yeah.
Yeah, out of the box thinking. Like I'm thinking when something, it's somebody's preparing to do something, whether it might be serve a meal or a project or decorating, and then they realize that they're missing some tools or supplies, or something breaks or something burns. and they figure out a way to to adjust and adapt, and everything in the end turns out fine. And I'm just marveled by that. It's like, wow, I would have been like, oh, well, the prescribed plan was to do ABC, and then one piece is missing, so you get stopped. But yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Right. Absolutely. So those are the qualities that we're going to talk about again, because it's so much more than being artistic, right? Being creative. And so what I want to do is I just want to go through, and this comes from the course that I'm certified to teach, which is the Creative Insight Journey, these 12 characteristics. And thanks for sharing that, Ellen. These 12 characteristics, we're all born with them. That's the good news. We're all born with these 12 characteristics. It just comes down to if we choose to nurture them, if we're in an environment that encourages us to nurture them. We just, often we just need that one person to have, we all need that one person to encourage us to bring these characteristics out in us. So ready, here are the characteristics, right? And I think resourcefulness is caught up in a bunch of these. This resourcefulness, like Ellen said, kind of weaves throughout this, and it comes from this. So what I want to do is just briefly talk about these 12 characteristics. Okay, so first of all, a high self-esteem. Now it's proven that highly creative people are confident, right? And what they have learned to do is listen to their inner voice of wisdom, right? So they're not as concerned about the judgment of other people, right? They also have learned to become more confident, because we can all learn to be more confident by reflecting on what we've overcome in our lives, the challenges we've overcome. We can focus on the successes that we've had, and even the failures that we've had, and when we failed in certain situations, what did we do to get to the next step anyway? So I'm sure, again, we've all had moments in our life where we've come up against a situation that was frustrating and we've overcome it. So you want to go back and reflect on, hey, I've overcome, my daughter had um, a reading disorder. I was told by multiple people, she'll be fine, Amy, she'll be fine. And I kept thinking, no, there is a disconnect. This kid is not able to read. So I had to keep being, and it was a combination of these characteristics, but I had to have the confidence in myself to say, hey, I've been told no before. And I've, I, when I have to listen to my gut. There's something that I can figure out here to help her, right? So you need to focus on different aspects of our life. And I'm sure each of you can think of times where you've overcome a difficult situation or you've accomplished something that you're really proud of, right? Um, Number two, a positive attitude towards failure. And that means that highly creative people know that their failures are simply stepping stones that lead them forward, right? Um, I have had a, you know, I've had a variety of different failures in my life, right? I'm sure all of us have. And what do? You dust yourself off and you think, okay, that didn't work. Take two, let's go on, right? And you learn from your mistakes. Number three, and this goes back to being, having a sense of awe. This goes back to being childlike. So having a sense of awe means having an overall view of life where you wake up each day and you look at life through fresh eyes. Does that make sense? Fresh eyes, right? Children, again, are natural at this. They're in awe. I'm sure, Lorraine, you can think of when your little boy sees a dog for the first time, or when my girls saw snow for the first time. They're in awe of that, right? So we have to remind ourselves to keep looking at life with this fat filter on, that this is amazing, right? There's rain coming down, nurturing the grass, which is now brown in my backyard, which will soon be green, right? So you have to keep looking for that awe in life. Also, number four, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but detached observation. Does anybody know what that means? No, I see Ellen shaking her head, and I'm not sure, Ty and Carla, if you know what that means, but it means that creative people have a mindset that they realize, okay, this is working in my life, this is not. I can see where I need to tweak this and improve here. And they take constructive feedback. They take feedback constructively, right? They take it as in, thank you for telling me that. Yeah, I'm not the best at managing my time. Okay, somebody tells you that, then you think, okay, well, I'm not going to take it personally. I'm going to think about how can I improve that. It's kind of like if you think about scientists, and I was never really good in science class, but when you think about scientists, right, um, they have no sense of attachment to how the experiment turns out. They just so imagine you put your lab coat on and you're studying yourself and the world around you, right? So we need to remember that when we're studying ourselves and the world around us, not to have emotion or judgment, but just to see things as they are. One of these characteristics that I've needed help with throughout the years a lot is concentration, right? So I had somebody tell me, like, Amy, you have lots of different projects happening, but you're not finishing them. And I could have gotten very upset by that comment. Instead, I thought, that's a good point. I need to finish things, right? So, what can I do to help myself do that? And when we get to concentration, I'll share more about that because that is something I need to work on. So, observation is key to awareness because when we're aware of what's happening, then we can understand it and we can understand how we can fix it. We can look for solutions. Number 5, curiosity. Again, it goes back to children, right? Kids ask so many questions. And sometimes as parents, you're like, okay, enough with the questions. But we really don't want to discourage the questions because what happens as we grow up? We stop asking questions. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's because we think we already know the answer. Yeah, we know what he's going to say. Yeah, we know what's going to happen when we go, to our in-laws for Easter. We know what's going to happen when we get together for July 4th at, our sister's house. But, we already know. So we stop asking questions. Oh, I don't need to ask the doctor. He told me this. Really, in reality, ladies, we need to keep asking questions because when we ask questions, we keep learning. And it's not like, oh, ask questions just for the sake of talking. No, really think about a doctor gives you a diagnosis. Really think about how is that going to affect your life? What do you need to do? Right. I just recently had shoulder surgery. The doctor gave me just a few minutes of a quick checkup. Right. And I said, hey, excuse me, doctor, I have 3 questions for you that I need you to answer. He was just going to, and he's, oh, okay, sure. It didn't take that long. But I said, you know, how long before I start physical therapy? You said at some point I can start. How long do I, how long until I can carry more than a coffee cup? That's important for me to know. And he was happy to answer the questions, but I needed to really think about what do I need to learn in this situation? How is this going to help me? It's my shoulder, right? So it's up to us to ask the questions. And curiosity leads to questions, right? So that's important. Again, children are great examples of that. Number 6, intuition. Highly creative people are intuitive, which means they trust what they feel, and they know what feels right and they know what doesn't. Um, and we all have the capacity to strengthen and cultivate our intuition. A lot of times, especially women, you see this in articles about, date rape, right? Women knew as soon as they had that man say, oh, I'll help you bring the groceries up to your apartment, because they knew something didn't feel right? You know that. And our world, especially as women, causes us to doubt that. You want to be polite, you don't want to be rude to him, um, whatever. But after all is said and done, that woman knew. I have a great example of that. My husband went into business with this gentleman, and 6 months after they were in business, I met this man, and my daughter met this man. My daughter was only 5, and we spent the day with them. and it was fine. We got in the car at the end of the day, and my daughter looked at me. She's 5. She likes everybody, right? She likes everybody. She looked at me. I said, "Oh, how was the day?" She said, "It was fine." I said, "What's going on?" She said, "You know, mommy, I didn't like that man." And I said, "Really?" And now I knew, I didn't say, I knew. I said to her, "You know what? That's your intuition talking. And I'll tell you, mommy didn't feel comfortable with that man either. And we have to keep that alive." She said, "Okay." Now she's 5. She gets in the car, she falls asleep. My husband and I start talking about the day. And I said, "I don't know what happened, honey, but when I shook that man's hand, everything in my body told me to run." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Seriously, I've never felt like that. I felt like prey." And he said, "Seriously?" I said, "Yeah." Okay, 6 months after I met that man, we found out he was lying to us, he was robbing, he was cheating. It led to years of financial disaster. And my husband jokes, but he says to me, "Oh, now I need you to meet every business partner before I get into business with them." But I couldn't help it. I said to him, I had such a, and not always do you have that strong of a reaction. Even if you have a whisper, you have to listen to it. You have to give that credit. And that again is a muscle we can strengthen. Okay. So any questions so far? Any questions or stories you want to share on those 6? No? Okay. So number 7, concentration. Okay. Highly creative people start a project, they stay with it, and they bring it to fruition. Again, personally, this has been a characteristics that I had to work really hard on strengthening. Um, I was starting projects and I was so excited about different opportunities that I wasn't bringing them to fruition. For example, I had drafted a book years ago and I kept thinking, "Oh, I'll start it now. I'll start it now." And I would start to write a little bit and then I was no. Finally, a couple years ago, I took it out and I brought it to fruition and it felt wonderful. I focused on that. And another way that I help with my concentration on a daily basis, completing a presentation like I'm doing with you ladies, I would turn off my phone for an hour. Yesterday, I turned off my phone for an hour. I practiced, I reviewed what we wanted to talk about today. I didn't look at my emails, I didn't look at texts. I figure anybody can wait an hour. And if they can't, and if they're that close to me and they can't, they know my home number and they'll ring that home number until I pick up, right? Or they'll keep buzzing this and buzzing this until I'd say, "Okay, something's wrong," right? Which would only take a matter of 5 minutes. If somebody kept buzzing and buzzing and buzzing nonstop for 5 minutes, I'd be like, "Okay, what's happening?" But otherwise, I just put aside an hour and I really looked at what we wanted to talk about today so I could get an understanding and be ready to speak with you guys fluently, right? And bring it to fruition. Number 8, incubation. Okay. I don't know if it's not a word I would normally think about for, yeah, I see Ellen shaking her head, to think about with creative people, but this links back in, I was always having all these ideas, right? And I was doing them a little here, a little there. Somebody who's highly creative learns to incubate an idea. So when they have different ideas, they understand how to say, "Okay, this is a really interesting idea, but I can put this on the back burner right now. I don't have to act on it immediately. I can put it on the back burner and wait until it's a better time for me to focus on it." Does that make sense? Right? So they don't go, "Oh, well, I have all these ideas. I'm going to start some of them here, start some there, and then I'm going to it's not working. Throw them out, throw them out. It's not working." No. Instead, you say, "Okay, you know what? I have an idea in a couple years after my kids graduate high school. I want to also be doing this, going around and speaking, in different states, say, right? Right now, it's not a good time for me to do that. I have high school kids, right? That could be a long-term goal, right? So you know when and how to say, "Not right now, but I can put this on the back burner and figure it out later." Okay, number 9, passion versus obsession. So highly creative people know the difference. Um, we can be truly passionate about our work, a hobby, or our families, traveling, something, right? But we know it's unhealthy when we move from passion to obsession. And obsession is when other aspects of your life start to deteriorate, right? Now, there's going to be times sometimes when you ramp up. Like I know Lorraine just had a lot of work going on with the Rise and Thrive conference, right? So sometimes that's going to ebb and flow. She's passionate about bringing it to fruition. That makes sense. But on a daily basis, all the time, every day, 24/7, every day of the year, to be going that hard all the time, it means most likely some other aspect of your life, a hobby, time with friends, family, your spouse, it's going to start to fall by the wayside. And that's not healthy. So you need to make sure you understand how to still make time for other important aspects of your life. Number 10, persistence, right? Creative people, Ellen, you said it before, even when plan A doesn't work, they figure out plan B, right? They're persistent. They call on their sense of curiosity to be resourceful, to still make things happen. Their passion carries them through, right? And this ties in with number 11, their faith in their creativity. So when you're persistent, you keep going, you find a way around that block. And it ties in with number 11 because number 11, some of the naysayers may say, oh, it's already been done. Amy, there's already been books written for new moms. There have been, yeah, but they haven't come through me. This is my own sense of my story for those who, read my book, for those to learn from, right? So I have to say, yeah, there have been lots of books written for new moms, but humbly, this is my 2 cents, and hopefully it will help other people. Or this is what I have to present. This is what I have to offer, right? And I have an interesting thought here because I had a woman in one of my classes who, she wanted to do an organization, like an organizing business. And people said to her, oh, yeah, well, there's lots of people who already do organizing, but they hadn't done it with her sense of passion, with her sense of outlook. So she now has a great, thriving organizing business, right? She had faith that she could bring it out in a unique way and find people who could work with her, her way of working resonates with those people. So you want to be persistent, right? You want to keep moving in a positive way. And the last one, creative people are playful. They have a sense of playfulness, which I love. When you think about people you respond to or you connect with, people who can laugh um, at their own mistakes, who help you feel lighter, right? There's a sense of playfulness about them. And so it's important. Again, kids are great examples of this. They play for the sake of playing. They're not playing to be recognized or rewarded. And we as adults sometimes take ourselves too seriously and we forget to play. And so, I have learned over the years that when I'm doing the dishes or doing the laundry, I put on music. It makes me feel lighter. I find myself singing. I may even like bust a move every so often, right? But it just makes it lighter for me, these chores. So you can intertwine being playful with what you have to do, as well as on our kitchen table, I keep a couple decks of cards. And so sometimes the girls will walk into the kitchen and I'll say, hey, you want to play a game of cards? And they're like, sure. It's just an easy reset button. We'll laugh at, who wins or the cards that were dealt. It's just a moment to reset our minds, to play a game. We play Clue, that, game from a long time ago, but the board game Clue. It just helps you reset and laugh, right? Like, okay, it's Mr. Plum in the library with the candlestick, but it gets you thinking differently. So, any questions about those characteristics? You're good. Okay. All right.
Well, actually, Amy, could I
Yeah.
ask,
Of
Do
course.
do creative folks tend to have dominant characteristics of the 12? Or
Well, this is what I
strong?
was going to say, right? Good
Okay.
question, Ellen. Good question. And this is what I am going to say next is which characteristics do you have, right? Because we're
Uh-oh.
all born with them, but which ones do you feel you have easily, right? We all have them, but sometimes we say, like, I used to say, yeah, I really don't have a great sense of concentration, right? Um, I need to learn how to put things on the back burner and incubate, right? And you can learn to do that. So, yes, some of these characteristics are going to be come easily to you, right? Lorraine, you probably don't always think about how creative you are, but when you stop and pause, you think, yeah, my passion carries me through a lot. My persistence to get these these seminars and webinars up and running for Dress for Success, right? But a lot of times we can overlook our own creative characteristics because it comes so easily to us because they are maybe dominant, as you said, Ellen, because we just think, oh, that's just who I am. It works. Does that make sense, Ellen? Yeah, I
Yes,
answered your
yes, yes.
question. Okay.
Yep, thank you. Uh-huh.
Okay. Yep, you bet. Okay, so here are 5 beliefs that creativity is based on. I have my cat here. You can see her little tail. Okay,
Mhm.
so creativity is essential. It's core to our lives. People don't think that. It doesn't get a lot of recognition, in the business world, in the world of work. But it's not something we add on. It's something that we're born with, and it needs to be expressed. We need to remember that. Again, it's within all of us. All 12 of those characteristics can be nurtured within us. And again, first step is awareness. So now that we're aware of those characteristics, we can start to name them. We can start to name the ones that we feel good about, that we're confident in. We can start to name the ones that we want to work on and figure out a plan as to how to work on them. What's upsetting is creativity is often blocked by fear. And that is, fear that we've learned somewhere along the way, right? A fear of being judged. Um, and it becomes ingrained in our mind that we don't want to look foolish, right? So we don't want to be the one to stand out. We don't want to be the one to ask the question. Nobody else has questions. Well, we won't ask the question either. But really, most of the time, what studies also find is when somebody has a question, other people are thinking that same question, right? So somebody has to be bold enough, creative enough, um, confident enough to ask it, right? I always say to my girls, people are happy to help polite people. You don't have to be aggressive in the way you ask a question. You can be politely assertive, right? You can be, smile as you ask the question. So the fear gets us stuck. So we it doesn't allow creativity to surface because we become too fearful. So we have to be aware of what fears hold us back, how our voice of judgment holds us back. So, number 4, ready for this? Creativity is actually strengthened when we start to pay attention to it. So, now that we've talked about those 12 characteristics, ladies, now that you can name those 12 characteristics, you understand what they mean, you can nurture them and you can strengthen them. Because once you start to pay attention, you know, my girlfriend, I've known her since I was 9 years old. She always says, you focus on the problem gets bigger. You focus on the solution gets bigger. So if you're focusing on your fear, that's going to get bigger. If you're focusing on your creative characteristics, they're going to grow and they're going to strengthen. So that's what we want to do. Okay. Um, and it brings me back to what I was saying before, number 5, creativity works differently for each of us. And so it's very easy for us, Carla, Lorraine, Ty, Ellen, it's really easy for us to overlook how we're creative. Again, like that mom who, she and I were talking and she always amazed me at how she organized different spaces in her home. And I would say, I never thought of that. She'd go, really? I'd say, yeah, I just never thought about organizing, my laundry room like that. oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to do it now. And I would say that to her and she'd go, really? And I said, yeah. So she was overlooking ways she was being creative and she turned that into a business, right? I had another woman who took one of my classes who she was saying she used to clean houses. And she would say, as I would clean people's houses, sometimes I would say to them, hey, is it okay? Do you mind if I move this, red candle over to this corner of the room and these, sculptures over here? And they'd say, okay. And she started to recognize what she was doing instinctively was feng shui, and so she started to read more about feng shui. She now has a thriving business where she comes in, she's done this with my home, and she, especially after that whole disaster that I told you about with my husband's business partner, and we feng shuied his office and our home in different ways. And we've been able to reignite a new energy in our home. Now, not everybody's going to believe that. I happen to, after doing it, happen to be a big believer in it because I've seen it work. And my husband was a major doubter. But that was a creative aspect of herself that she overlooked because it came easily to her. Some people say to me, Amy, you talk so easily when you're presenting information. And I think, really? And they're like, yeah, I'd be really scared to do that. But that's something that I'm passionate about. And so it's easy for us to overlook things that we're natural at doing because we think it happens for everybody. Does that make sense also? Okay. So, lastly, that's what I was saying. The creative process works differently for each of us. And that means that, as my dad has always said, you look at what works for different people, you listen to what different people say, and then you take a little bit of what everybody's saying and you make it your own. You make it work for yourself. You know, you're not going to, I'm not going to live my life just like Lorraine, right? But I'm going to take aspects of what she says and think, huh, that's really interesting. I learned from that and incorporate it into my life. Sometimes knowingly, sometimes even subconsciously, you do that. So we need to remember that. So that's the kind of creativity we're going for. Do those 5 beliefs make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Good. Okay. So we need to go for the type of creativity that empowers us. That's the type of creativity we're going for. And when you think about that, you want to think about an aspect of your work or your a hobby or an aspect of your life that you really feel absorbed in. Like I could um, create presentations and coursework for women for hours and get lost in time, right? I could read different articles about what's happening with women related to coronavirus and the workforce for hours. And it's my passion. I just get completely absorbed in it. I also get absorbed in um, kayaking. I like to go out and just go out on a lake and I can be out there forever, right? My brother-in-law is like that too. My sister will have to call and be like, hello, are you coming home soon? Right. But it's something that where we just feel re-energizes us. My mother-in-law is like that with prayer. She can pray for hours. She just feels like it empowers her to be a better person. It brings out those characteristics in her to be more creative and alive for those around her. Right. All right. So we want to think about how when we're in that creative zone, like some people run, right? They have that runner zone they talk about. They can run and they just come back and they feel re-energized. So we need to think about what creative outlet are we allowing ourselves? Are we encouraging ourselves to do? So that brings me to the tool for today, and we're going to wrap up then. So the tool for today is a really simple shift of one word. And again, you can write it on, a sticky note, and it goes from I have to, and you change that word have to get. I get to. So now some people say, "Oh, really? I get to take the garbage out? I get to do the laundry? Yay." But think about it. Ready? This tool, instead of having this mindset, when we say we have to make dinner for our family, we have to go to work, we have to drive our kids to school, if we change that, right? Because that sounds very, um, it sounds like drudgery, right? That's the word I'm looking for. It sounds like, oh, it's a chore. We have to do this. We have a list of to dos all day. We have to do, right? And it's a real chore. Whereas when you say in your mind and you switch that simple wording to, I get to go to work, I get to drive my children. It might sound like, oh, really? But that mindset shift helps a lot because our brain responds to our words, right? So we have to train our brain the way we want. We have control of it. So I get to go to work. All of a sudden, you have a sense of thankfulness. I have a job. I get to have this outlet, right? I get to use different abilities of mine at work than I do at home. I get to drive my kids to school because I'm healthy enough to drive. I am home and able to spend a few minutes in the car with them before they start their school day, right? Um, I was joking, and this one woman in a class said to me, yeah, and I get to take the garbage out. And this other woman, without me saying a thing, chimed in and said, yeah, you get to take the garbage out. You have to, sure, that's drudgery, but you get to because your legs work. And this was coming from a woman who's in a wheelchair. She goes, you get to take the garbage out. You get to get outside for a couple minutes every day, rain or shine, and just experience fresh air, right? I'm in a wheelchair. I can't do that simple task. And all of a sudden, all of us were like, wow, I have a whole new way of looking at taking out the garbage now, right? So, it sounds very simple, but changing one word here and there in our lives can really make a difference. For example, when I teach this class to moms, you can have the attitude that I have to take care of, raise, teach, love, feed, bathe, um, walk with my kids, right? I have to do all these things. Or you can have the approach, I get to take care of, raise, teach, and love these crazy kids of mine because I chose to have them. I get to do that because I've been given this role as mom. So there's lots of ways by using this simple word shift. It causes a creative spin, and that creates a feeling of opportunity, thankfulness, and at the very least, some lightheartedness, a little playfulness. Lorraine, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So, I get to do the laundry. Well, that's not always fun for me. But, saying I have to do the laundry, that sounds like drudgery. But I get to do the laundry. Well, thankfully, I have a washing machine or I have access to a washing machine.